Hello, everyone. The very warmest of welcomes to the latest episode of Not If But When. It is the podcast that delivers informative funeral chat right into your very own lovely little ears. I am Kirsty Atherton. I'm an independent celebrant and I work in the northwest of England.
And I am Lindsay Conquest. I'm also an independent celebrant and I am based down in Bedfordshire. So
Right.
welcome. Well, welcome to this week's podcast where we are talking about what are we talking about, Kirsty?
We're
Something
talking about living funerals, which we are aware is a total oxymoron, and that is what we are talking about today.
yes.
That there is a concept of them which we fully embrace, but we have objections to the term. And that's what we're talking about. And it kind of links in really with what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about celebration of life. Um, that a celebration of life is one thing and a funeral is another thing. Um, yeah, so that's where we're going this week on this one. And yeah, and we've got opinions.
We
We've always
have.
got opinions,
We've
haven't
all
we?
we've always got opinions, but
It's what
we've
we like.
definitely got opinions on this one. And I
Mm,
just it almost feels to me like there's just this big confusion that's happened somewhere along the lines where we've
yeah,
got living funerals, we've got celebration of life, and we've got funerals. And I think,
yes,
the term living funerals, as you have said, is a complete oxymoron. Moron. You cannot have a living funeral.
you
If you do,
cannot be, no, because by definition, a funeral is any kind of rite or ritual which occurs because somebody has died.
yes.
And that is what a funeral is. And you need that. The people who are left behind need that. We've spoken about this before. Do not take us down the direct crime rabbit hole again.
No.
However, we do fully acknowledge that when somebody knows that their death is imminent, whether that is weeks, months, a couple of years, if somebody has that awareness that they are entering that stage of their life, we totally, completely support the idea of getting people together, saying the things that you want to say, having that time. But what we do object to is that being called a living funeral. That is a celebration of life.
100%. Yeah, that's exactly where I'm at with it. Is I just so confused as to why you wouldn't call it a celebration of life and where this term living funeral has come from. And when the conversation is sort of raised with people, I have a lot of people that just go, well, what a living funeral, like it
Mm.
just doesn't seem right, and it doesn't. But if you say you're celebrating a life, the life that you've lived with all of those people that were important to you, enabling yourself, to have a chance to say goodbye on your terms and to celebrate, the life that you lived and the parts of your life that were most important to you, then it's an amazing, amazing idea that I think we're both totally on board with.
Totally. And I think that the unspoken thing there is the amount of people who'd really like to say what somebody was going to say about them after they died.
Yeah.
And to actually have the chance to hear that, because actually that is that we always talk, don't we, about how funerals are for the living. They are
Yeah.
about the dead, but they are for the living and their healing and their grief journey and moving forward and all that stuff that we constantly bang on about.
Yeah.
Um, but there are things said about you at your funeral that you may never have heard people actually vocalize before.
Yeah.
And that is a real shame. And I get that. I get that people would love to, have that opportunity. We were talking about this with a friend of ours, though, recently, weren't we?
Yeah.
And one of the things that we were discussing was how upfront people would be in that, knowing that you are in the room. Would that
Yeah.
change what people would say?
Yeah.
Um, not in the sense that if you're in the room, they'd say positive things, and if they were actually speaking at your funeral, they'd tell everybody what a tyrant you were. Not to that extent. Well,
No.
hopefully not to that extent. But whether that is, can you ever hear somebody's eulogy for you? Because if you are alive, if you are, it is your living funeral, it is your celebration of life, and you're there. are they thinking about you in a way that you can eulogize someone in?
Yeah.
Am I getting too philosophical there? I don't
No,
know.
no, not at all. And I think, I think the thing is, my view on it is you can't have one without the other. You can't have a living funeral, as people are calling them, or this big celebration of life, without also having the funeral
Yeah.
itself.
It's
And I
not an
think
either. Yeah. Yeah.
we were talking just before we started recording about a film that I said to you about, Kirsty,
Mm,
that's on Netflix. It's called Love at First Sight. If you haven't seen it, go and watch it, because that gives you an example of, I suppose, what this sort of living funeral could be like. And with you talking about sort of the eulogy side of it, Kirsty, actually, I think that's more, in those circumstances, that's sort of saved more for the funeral itself, which in my view should still happen.
yeah.
But this living funeral, if we're going to call it that, or the celebration of life, did you
I
hear my
wish you could
tone of voice
I wish you
change
could see
then?
the eye rolls that are going on here. She's doing
um,
air quotes, she's doing eye
Yeah, I
rolls.
am. It's more an opportunity for that person who has found out that their life is very limited,
Yeah.
to just get together with their loved ones, with their family
Yeah.
and friends, and just celebrate all the things they loved. And
Yeah.
in
Which
this
we are
film, it's
here for, aren't
yeah,
we? Wholeheartedly.
100%. Yeah, yeah. And the film on Netflix, Love at First Sight, she loves all things to do with Shakespeare. I think she was an actress, and so she gets everybody dressing up as characters from Shakespeare
I wanna
um
go see that.
plays, and it's just brilliant. So you should watch it. And I think that gives a really good example of how positive and how lovely these celebrations can be. But
Yeah.
then definitely there's still that space for the proper eulogy, people to really talk about and reflect on that person's life later on at an actual funeral service.
Yeah, absolutely. It can't be a replacement, can it? It
No,
has to be an addition. Yeah.
no,
Yeah. Yeah, so what really our only problem with it then is literally just the terminology, isn't it?
definitely.
That I think that that's a nice way to think about it in terms of that is a celebration of life, isn't it?
Mm.
And that's there is a use for that term and
Yeah,
there's space for that term as well, isn't there? But it is a different thing.
yeah,
Interesting one.
yeah. And
Would you
some
have one?
interesting, sorry?
Would
Would
you have one?
Do you know? I don't know, and I don't think I could answer that unless I was ever faced, which I just hope I'm not in the near future faced with having to sort of consider my life ending sooner than I would want it to,
Mm,
sort of not. And then
mm,
I suppose then you must have all of these thoughts, and the thought of perhaps getting everybody together who's meant something to you in your life, and to really just having one big party and celebration with them. I don't think there's many people that wouldn't want that. However, I do know that a very dear friend of mine who was put into that position, she would not have wanted to, and did not have anything like that, because she didn't want to accept the fact that she was going to die. She was desperately wanting to live for as long as she possibly could, and
yeah,
she felt that acknowledging it in any way was not right for her. So there
yeah.
obviously are people out there that this just isn't right for, and I don't know
Mm,
if I can answer at the moment whether it would be something I'd want. It would just depend on what life threw at me, and what
mm,
age I was and where in life I was, about whether it was
mm.
something I'd want to have. What about you?
Well, it was a very unfair question of me to throw at you, wasn't it? Unexpectedly, then, but it just it just came to mind. Yeah. Similarly, I've never been in that position yet in my life, thankfully. Um, my heart, my gut says no, that I don't
Mhm.
think I would want it. Um, I have a real, have a real issue with the idea of things being forced,
Yeah,
and as us being really good friends that I don't leave things unsaid if something needs to be said. If I need to tell somebody I love them, if I want to tell that, I do it all the time.
yeah.
And I feel like the majority of people that I have like drawn to me in my life are similarly so. I don't feel like I would need almost to kind of manufacture that situation. Oh, I don't know. That sounds really harsh. And it isn't in a way of like saying that I don't approve if people do that. It's just, um, yeah, I'm much more of a person who would want to, you know, be on the sofa in pajamas having a really in-depth conversation over a delicious bottle of something rather than somebody who would like a great big room full of people and we're all partying. I'm not saying I'm boring. I do like a dance. I do like a drink. I do like a loud sing. But that doesn't really do for me.
No.
Doesn't no. But having said that, who knows? Because I haven't been in that situation, and I would never, try and make my mind up about that in advance. Yeah, my heart says not for me, but
No. And it's
mm,
another reason I think anyway, just to, while we're on the conversation, is just to tell those people that you really love, like you've just said, be open, tell them now, tell them how much you love them, tell them how proud you are of them if they do something that, you're
yeah,
proud of or means something to you, because,
yeah,
that's,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
I
no,
think that's a really important part of the way that you live your life when you've been a bereaved child. So I would describe myself as a bereaved child, even though I was a teenager.
mm,
But I think you do live your life like that. Or I think a lot of people who've been in that situation live their lives like that because you are conscious all the time that you don't know the minute. And
yeah,
as much as it would be horrendous to leave my house one morning and never return, if I then were on a cloud with in the sky looking down, which I don't believe I would be, but if I was, I don't feel like I'd be looking down thinking, oh, I wish I'd have said, or oh, if only they knew how much I love them.
yeah,
I don't think I leave you in any doubt of how much I love you,
no,
and I treat everybody in my life like that when I do love them. A lot of people in my life that I'm not that keen on also. Uh, that's a whole other conversation. Yeah, but I feel like, if that's the joy of it, is like you don't to live that way without having your mortality kind of printed on your face because
yeah,
that's how I've lived my adult life, being very aware of mortality. We are getting very close to the birthday when I will be the same age as my dad ever was, and it's weird. It's
yeah,
a weird
it must
thing.
be, yeah,
um Yeah, so actually, maybe there's a pod in that about actually how
maybe,
that does feel once I am that age.
yeah,
Yeah, so I think that, yeah, I get why people do it though. I
yeah,
totally get why people do it.
I
And I
do,
particularly get it when people have been really into, I don't know, they've been like old school ravers, or like they're really into live music, or, one last chance to, all jump around and
yeah,
shout and scream at a band in a field. I totally get that.
yeah,
It's not kind of my vibe, but I see why people would want it. And yeah, and if you want it, do it. Absolutely.
definitely,
There are no
yeah.
funeral police.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't know how I feel about people trying to, yeah, persuade people to have one. I think it's got to come from that person that's
Oh,
actually in that
absolutely.
situation. So, if,
Yeah.
you are faced knowing that, that you've got a life limiting illness,
Mm.
you know, um, that, and you think it's a good idea, yeah, like Kirsty says, just go ahead and do it, but please don't start pushing these ideas on your family and friends who are already going through what must be a horrific time with,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
definitely,
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like it's not necessarily perhaps how much do you want it as much as
mm,
it is how much do you want it and how much do the people around you feel that it's appropriate for them
yeah,
too. Because
yeah,
it's not by nature of, we're not going to call it living funerals anymore, are we? By
no,
nature of holding a celebration of life in that way, you need people there to be able to celebrate with you, and they might
yeah,
not want to do that,
no,
you know.
exactly.
But if you are wanting them to remember you as like a massive bossy tyrant who forced them into having fun, go for it. Make
Go
them
for
do
it. Go ahead and have it. Yeah, have it. And then, but then, yeah, just remembering, like we've said, that it doesn't replace the funeral itself, which is so important for those who are left behind after your death. And it's a really, really important part for them, offering sort of closure is not the word. It's not closure, but it's just part of the grieving process, isn't it? Enables them
Mm.
to all come together and just gives them that really important space. And so, yeah, Just have them
Yeah.
both. Don't replace one with
Yeah. I think that's it ultimately, isn't it? I'm really intrigued by your use of the word closure there because I know what you mean. It isn't closure, but what is the word for what that is?
yeah, I
It's
don't
like this,
know.
it's almost like a step that you can't skip, isn't
Yeah,
it? So
yeah.
I was
I
telling
suppose
you
it is a form of closure on that part,
on that
you know, you
piece of the
need a proper
journey, isn't it?
funeral to sort of give closure, to just close that one part of it, to then just sort of, because you hear it a lot, don't you? Or I do with families that I work with, they'll often say, we just need to get through the funeral, just need to
Yeah.
get that part done. And
It's a real
then
milestone, isn't
it
it?
is a huge
Mm.
milestone. So I suppose it does offer it closure to a certain part of that family's grief and what they've
Yeah.
gone through, and then I suppose opens up a door to maybe, some families would have even said, sort of more of a private sort of time of mourning, because actually a lot of that contact that you get all around the time of the death and the funeral really tails off. That funeral happens,
Oh,
and people do have to get on with their lives. They have to go back to work and they have to do things, and unfortunately those that are left, that in the immediate family and partners, can feel a little bit um
mhm.
in
Abandoned.
limbo there, but it definitely sort of opens up, I suppose, a new door to a new part of their grief.
Yeah, and as you were saying that, the word that was coming to my mind was it's opening. Maybe it's not a closure, maybe it's
No.
an opening, and it's an
Yeah,
opening of, yeah, that the so we have a funeral because it's a communal part of it, is because it's a communal thing, and we have the chance to share how we felt about that person, share what that person meant to us, and also share in our grief and hold one another up in our grief.
yeah.
And it is a very public thing and it is a very community thing.
Mm,
But yet then you do need to find a way, you need to open up another door to find a way that you as the individual are going to then carry on. How are you going to move forward then at that point with the rest of your life? Because we always say grief never ends. It's just
yeah,
you just adapt. You just, it becomes another part of you.
mm,
And you have to do that on your own because
yeah,
every relationship you have with that person, every relationship everyone had with that person are unique and individual to them, aren't they?
yeah,
Yeah. It's a really
definitely.
interesting one, isn't it? I just
Mm.
God, we say this all the time. I hope everybody else agrees that it's interesting.
It is interesting. It is interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so yeah, if you have not seen the film on Netflix, Love at First Sight, do go and watch it, because if you haven't got a clue about what we're meaning by living funerals, that will give you a really good idea of quite an impressive version of one.
Yeah.
So go
Yeah.
and have a look at that, and
There's
yeah, I
also one I'm just thinking in an episode. I always get the name wrong of this. It's either called Frankie and Grace or Grace and Frankie.
think it's
It's wonderful.
Frankie
Is
Grace.
it Frankie and Grace?
So
I love it. It's absolutely fabulous. It's
mm,
Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda. Um, and it's on Netflix. And there is an episode of that which I should be able to tell you what season it's in, but I don't know. And it's where their next door neighbor, who they are both really close friends with, holds her funeral before
right,
her death. And then she disappears, she goes off to what I would assume is a hospice or something like that.
mm,
And the next thing they know, they have her back in an urn.
right,
So
okay,
yeah, there's it's interesting. I must admit, weirdly, although I really that's my kind of palate cleanser TV program, when you just need a little bit of comfort because you've
yeah,
watched something true crime documentary or something
yeah, yeah,
terrifying and you just need a minute before you go to bed. So I tend to watch it then. And when I knew that was the next episode, I didn't watch it for weeks and weeks and weeks. And
mm,
I don't know why I didn't. And I'm
right,
wondering if I just generally have a sense of uncomfortableness about
yeah,
it,
yeah,
really. Um, I know that I don't know if you know the campaigner at all. I hope I'm probably going to pronounce her name wrong. She's called Chris Hallinger, I
right,
think. Anyway, she is the person who set up the charity Copperfield, which is about
yeah,
breast cancer awareness for
yeah,
young women because she was diagnosed, at like 23, 24, something, cruelly, horrendously young age. And she went on to kind of to set up this charity and to do all this work. And she had Instagram profile, called Glitter in a Turd, and her book is called How to Glitter a Turd, and it's all
Right.
about, like, living with knowing that this thing is going to eventually end your life, and she actually, died last month, the month before, I think she
Right.
was
Okay.
38. She had this event, um which she called her funeral, but it was FUN in capital letters, Ural.
Yeah.
And it was, I think it was in a cathedral. There was all sorts of famous people there. Everybody looked fabulous. There were sequins everywhere. She did that. It would be really interesting to know whether then her family did have a more conventional end of life ritual for her when
Yeah.
she did actually die. I'm not sure
Yeah.
what happened after that. But yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing that's becoming kind of a bit more high profile, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
definitely. I think there was one
options.
that Dawn French was
It was
involved
that.
in. It was
It
that
was
one.
that.
She came
Yeah.
she brought back the Vicar of Dibley, didn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
yeah.
And
It was
and
that, yeah.
and this young woman whose name I am probably pronouncing completely wrong. I think it's HALLENGA, if anybody wants to look for her. And she's Chris with a kickinker, with a K rather than a C. Kickinker. Because I'm only 5.
To any of the primary children listening,
There
it's
you
a
go, everybody.
kickinker.
Now that I can help you with your Googling. Yeah, it was. I don't know if she was from Cornwall, but she certainly lived in Cornwall.
Yeah,
And I know there's a Cornish connection with Dawn French, isn't there? So yeah,
definitely.
Dawn French was involved with it. I know Fern Cotton was, and
Mm,
Dawn Porter.
nice.
She was involved with it. And these are all the people who I follow on Insta for their outfits.
Yeah,
But yeah, super inspirational young woman, and yeah, somebody who really embraced that side of it. And
yeah.
yeah, so we're not, when we say we have opinions, we're not judging. We're just saying this is what we think. What do you think?
Yeah,
Yeah,
100%. We're not,
open the conversation,
never judging. It's just, we have opinions on things, we'll share them. But yeah, we're on
and
board.
we'll tell you when they change,
Yeah,
because yeah,
yeah.
because they change all the time, don't they? I mean,
Mm,
like, the more people we meet and do the funerals for, and more families that we sit with, and you learn something from every family, don't you?
yeah,
When things, I know that, you and I are like 3 years in now,
yeah.
and things have
Oh,
changed. I
wow.
know. And things have changed definitely
Yeah,
over those 3 years. We've both got different opinions about stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
So there you go,
okay.
everybody.
Yes,
Living funerals, the
yeah,
oxymoron.
yes. Yep, yep, yep. Okay, right. So that's us for this week.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah,
us for this week. Have you got
yeah.
any clue what we're talking about next time? Something.
Something interesting. And we've got
Yeah.
some episodes coming up where we are welcoming some guests onto
We
the podcast,
are.
which is super exciting. So
It
yeah,
is.
you'll find out more about that soon. But
Exactly.
until
And
next
very
week,
shortly, we will be going on our jaunt to the National Funeral
yes,
Exhibition, where we will be
yes.
reporting back on all things exciting.
Yes, so that will probably be in a couple of weeks that we'll get
Yeah,
to put that together and report back on that. So looking forward to that one as well.
me
So
too.
okay, but until next week,
Yeah.
we will say goodbye for now. Continue to
Yeah.
embrace life whilst embracing the inevitable. Bye for now.
Sound advice. Bye for now.
Bye.